Uh, all right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for joining the second part of the summit. So far, I've really been impressed with wonderful presentations, and I'm sure we're looking forward for more impressive and enlightening talks. And now we're quite honored, actually, to have a presentation that I'm sure everybody's looking forward to. Turning online lessons into a humane, meaningful, and enjoyable experience. And the presenter is Sheila Jarey Ben, who holds an MA in English Language and Literature with teaching certificate. She teaches educational technology in language learning at the University of Grenoble, Alpes, France. She manages a language training organization, Business English Services, and teaches English, general and business English. She is also a regular conference speaker and past president of TESOL. So with that, thank you very much for joining us and preparing this wonderful presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dina, for this lovely introduction. And hello from France. And I would like to thank especially Hannah, who has invited me to join you in this event that I met. And I met Hannah once in Paris when she came to one of our conferences when I was the president of TESOL France as our teachers association. So I'm based in France, and today is the day when actually our region where I live in the Alps in Grenoble, has gone to maximal level of alert. So I would say that surviving teaching during lockdown is still absolutely valid in a lot of parts of the world. So this conference is extremely helpful, and the sessions I've attended so far, they have already given me so much input, so much information, and so much help that it's really incredible. So thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen, and then I might come back to not sharing my screen because I'm going to share different screens with you. So I apologize if there will be a little lag in between face-to-face and screen-to-face interaction. So this is about how to turn online lessons into a human and meaningful and enjoyable experience. And I would like to start with this quote that I heard this morning from Dina in your presentation, when you said that we had to turn overnight to online teachers without proper training for it. And this is exactly my point here, that just because we lost our classrooms, we lost our students, we lost the physical space, it didn't mean that we all of a sudden had all those skills to turn this physical space into an online space to provide the same secure and enjoyable environment for our students as they used to have in the classroom. We all experienced this sudden shift, which happened overnight, in a different way. So we already had a presentation this morning with Mentimeter. So you must all be a pro in this. And I would like you either to scan the QR code, if you can, with your telephone, or just go on to the website of menti.com and type in the code, and you will have one question. And please put in your answer for this question, which should be just one word, one image, a type of metaphor that you would associate with your experience as an online teacher or teaching online as of March 2020. And this is This is when I'm going to come back, because if I'm in screen share mode, I don't see the chat. And I would like to see if we can get any answers to this question. So just go to the Mentimeter website. If you like, I can put the link on the chat, in the chat box. And using the code, which is also in the chat box, if you could put in a few answers. Can I get any feedback in the chat box if this works on your side? Okay, I don't seem to, yeah, it doesn't seem to work. So I will just skip this point. Maybe you can put your words in the chat box just to make you thinking and just to make this session a little bit more interactive, and we forget about Mentimeter technology for this point. And I will go back sharing my slide with you. So for me, teaching online is very much like a cloud. And the cloud is a commonly used term for online teaching, teaching on the cloud. There is Sugata Mitra with his innovative school in a cloud. And what I associate with this cloud and cloud teaching are these three words that you can see: distant, unreal, and ephemeral. And if we think about teaching, then what we find is that it's the total opposite of what teaching is about, because teaching is about connection, connecting with your students. Teaching is about grounding your materials and grounding the resources you use in the real life and students' real life in their real context. And last but not least, teaching is about creating a lasting experience, because if it's not a lasting experience, then it will never get into students' memories. An educational psychologist, Richard Mayer, who did a lot on online teaching and digital education, says that the cause of the change is the learner's experience in the environment. So what changed with the lockdown is this environment, is this context we had for teaching. Here's a full quote from Mayer, who defines learning as a permanent change. And what is important in this permanent change is that it has to be a long-term change. It needs to have a content, it needs to have a structure, and it has to be rooted, as I said, in learners' experience in the environment. Now, if we come back to our cloud image and we think about distance education as a cloud, this is not something new. So we can put it in a perspective, in a chronological historic perspective. And actually the first distance education moment happened in 1840 in England, in a town, Bath, where a certain Isaac Pitman, who was just a regular teacher as you and me, started to send postcards to his students to teach them shorthand. This was the first instance when the physical space was not shared by teacher and their students. In 1920s, with television, with radio around, there were a lot of distance education courses broadcast through TV and radio. In the 90s, with the arrival of the internet, of course, the internet became the medium of online courses and online distance education. And in 1991, the University of Philadelphia launched the first university online course. So you see, this is not distance education, online teaching is not something new. Now, what I would like to propose and put forward to and make you probably think about today is the difference between online teaching and teaching online. Are these two things the same? What I feel that no, they are not the same. Online teaching is when you work with a content which has already been written by experts, by content creators. You give models, you give exercises. You can use it in synchronous or asynchronous way. You can have it blended or purely online. But the main point is that it's your choice. You decide that you will be teaching online, you will use educational technology, and you will teach your students from distance. Now, teaching online is what happened in March. In France, it was 18th of March that we had to go in lockdown. So we were not prepared for all these things. It was not our choice. We didn't have the experts, the technology experts who could advise us. We had a very supporting community of teachers. I did training, for instance, for my colleagues at university to teach them how to use Zoom, how to use a Google document. But we were not ready for it. We had to teach online basically the same way that we taught in the classroom, being on the screen and having our students on the screen. So we had to provide an enjoyable learning environment for the students, and we had to provide them a positive learning experience. Now, how to do this? We didn't have the tools, we didn't have the skills to do this, so everybody did it in a different way. Now, if you go down from my little cloud, then you can see these mountains, and these are actually the mountains that surround our house, our region where we live. And to climb up those mountains, you need tools, you need equipment, and you have to adapt your equipment. You have to adapt your equipment to the height, to the level, to the surface where you are hiking. You have to adapt it to the weather. You also have to choose things when you pack your backpack, things that make you survive. You have to think about yourself, your well-being. You also have to need equipment that will keep your little group together, because usually when you climb up to 2,000 meters, you don't want to go on your own. So you will probably have ropes and other things to keep the little group together. So you need a set of tools, you need a set of equipments. And this is what basically happened with us as well in March, that we couldn't just use, and even today, we can't just use one tool, but we need a combination of tools. I call them a combo. Now, to select your combo, to select your tools, it's good to follow some principles. I've recently attended a webinar by Diane Larson Freeman, which was a similar event organized from Argentina, and it was called We Are All in This Together. And Professor Larson Freeman talked about the methods. They asked her what methods she would suggest. And what she said was very interesting, because she said that there is not one method. there are methods, and every teacher will use their own methods, which correspond to their context, which correspond to their students, and which also correspond to a current situation, which is, for instance, the lockdown situation. So when I selected and when I started to think what types of tools I'm going to use, I wanted to have tools which will help us establish a natural and meaningful personal relationship through the screens. I call these tools clean tools. So I didn't want to use very complicated tools because I didn't want to spend time on teaching my students how to use the tool. I wanted to be as simple as possible because the reaction had to be immediate. I wanted to have tools which allow me collaboration and creativity with my learners, because that's the method, that's my method that I use. I call it collaborative creative learning, where we co-create the content with the students. We do it in the class, so I wanted to have tools that I can continue this via screens. So I needed collaborative creative tools. And I also think it's important when you select your tools to keep a right balance between the new and the familiar. Because if you keep introducing new tools, then the students will get lost and they will spend more time on learning how to use the tool than actually on learning. So we selected, I call these familiar and friendly tools. We selected the tools together with the students, which is also a very important point, because from the time that you involve the student in a decision-making process, you empower them, you give them responsibility, ownership, feeling of ownership over their learning process. And when it comes to technology, they are very often more digital natives, we call them, than some of us are. So yeah, I have colleagues in middle school who use the Discord, for instance, and they teachers learn to use the Discord, the platform, from the students. So we selected tools together according to 3 principles: that the tool had to be clean, tools that are collaborative and creative, and also that tools are familiar and friendly and easy to use. So real life communication is very important to keep with your students, even if you just see them on the screen, because if you don't have this real life communication, you will lose them. They will just drop out without you even noticing that they are not there. So I wanted to have a tool and select a tool which allows the things that you can see on your screen. Tools where you can just send a little well-being check every now and then, how's it going? Tool which allows you for clarifications, because logistics is quite challenging when you teach online. Sometimes students don't know what time they have to come, they don't know which link they have to use. So it's good to have an extra tool which allows for this type of logistics communication. Through the same tool, you can send songs, articles, which are not necessarily related to what you are doing in class with your students, but you just came across an article which is related to their life, to the situation, and you would like to know their opinion about that. So you could share this type of information. It also allows group discussions, allows students to give you feedback, suggest a topic that they would like to work on. They can give their personal opinion, and it also allows to leave and send voice messages, which if you work with teenagers nowadays, they don't even type the message, they just say the message. So the tool I selected and we selected together was WhatsApp, and we created a WhatsApp group for our classes where we could all do all these things that I have just mentioned. So these are just short, meaningful, personal communication messages between you and the students. Of course, if you have 500 students, it's not that easy, but you can still make smaller groups. My groups are quite small, so I can use them as sort of guinea pigs to test new ways of doing things. Here's an example screenshot of little messages that we exchanged during this period. In the first one, you can see a clarification where I tell them where to go and what to do, and then one of them writes back, "I forgot what about the story I have to write, has to be about, can you tell me?" Then the second one is a video. It was a great video during lockdown, which came out a great realization. So I just sent them and I asked them to tell me, what do you think about it? What thoughts do you have about this video? And then it started a long discussion without any planning. We just went between the students. She says, it makes me think that the lockdown could be the key to saving humanity. The video makes me think that maybe the virus is not that bad because it makes us think and realize that lots of things has to change, and so on and so on. It creates a discussion because they reflect on each other's posts, of course. And the last one shows the voice message that helps communicate in English. And sometimes students who would never say a word in a class, they would leave a voice message on WhatsApp. So this was the tool, and this is a tool, but there are many other tools for real life communication. The other point is real life content. According to my method, the collaborative creative learning method, we co-create the content with students and we use their real life experiences and interests. So again, keeping in mind the clean tool principle, we decided to use a Google Drive and a Google form, a Google document, basically, Padlet and Book Creator for creating the content together. The Google Drive is extremely simple. Everybody knows how to use it. We started a Google Doc, which we kept like a log. And it was basically everything. Everything was in one document. It was a collaborative thing. It was also grammar and vocabulary every now and then. But most importantly, it was a list of reflective questions that I assigned to the groups, and everybody had to write and had to reflect on the other person's ideas. You can also use a document on Google Drive, a Google Doc, as a whiteboard. So when they ask for a word, when they ask a question, you just write on the document and they see it immediately. And students actually really love the fact that we can write on the same platform, on the same piece of paper at the same time. And then first time I could hear them just shouting out, "Oh, the teacher is writing at the same time, look at her." So it gives the connection between you and the student. It makes it lasting because it's there. You won't erase it like the whiteboard in the classroom. So it does have advantages. The Padlet, I'm sure you all know, you can use it to create a collaborative library. You can put their content from the internet, but you can also add content in PDF format from your computer, any document, any work, any handout, worksheet, whatever you wish to share with your students. And the Book Creator is a platform that we use at the very end, and you will see why and for what. I won't tell you at this point. So these are the tools, the clean tools that allow to do collaborative creative content creation with your students. These are examples of a few questions that I have asked them to reflect on the Google document. Things that they do differently today. They had to create lists and then wrote a letter. Then next week it was, I'm responsible for, again, they had to write lists. Lists are good because they promote critical thinking. They promote divergent thinking and creative thinking in students. When you ask them lists, after you always do something, like after the first thing we wrote a letter, I'm responsible for, then it was a dialogue, they had to compare with each other what you are responsible for at home, cleaning the dishes, I'm responsible for walking the dogs, type of things. Another question was my strategies to cope with the lockdown. And again, they had to make lists. And then from these lists, they created a calendar for April with their drawing on paper. Another question was what I've learned over the past 5 weeks. This was getting closer to the end of the lockdown. And then again, using the Google Drive, I asked them to create with real people, to create a survey and to ask real people in their lives to answer the questions. And based on the answer they got for their survey, they had to write a report. And I asked them, who do you want you to write your report to? And they said to the Prime Minister. So there was a report to the Prime Minister. Third part is probably the most difficult part, the live sessions. So we have this informal communication, we have the content that we create together and that we record on a Google document, and then came the live sessions, and we used Zoom as we use Zoom today. Now, Zoom and screens, and if you use any other platform, is difficult. And my teenager students would tell me after 2 weeks that I'm tired of technology, please do something else. And research was a little bit slower because it took them for about a month. And at the end of April, there were many articles published on different platforms about the draining effect of Zoom and screens and the reason behind these draining effects. So here you can see a list. You miss body language because you only see people's faces. It's very difficult to keep eye contact because to keep eye contact, you have to look into the camera, but when you look into the camera, you don't really see what's on the screen. So it's tricky. It's very difficult to match emotions because emotions come through body language, eye contact, a lot of non-verbal communication cues that we miss when we only see faces on a screen. There's also a problem of identity, that the fact that you see yourself and everybody else from the same perspective, I think our brain somehow gets a little bit mixed up. Who is me and who is you? Where is the limit between you and me? And some people are more conscious about themselves than other people. So it just makes the situation a little bit confused when you teach online or when you communicate through a screen. You intrude in other people's personal space as well, which can be tricky. Silence. In a classroom, you always have moments when there is a silence. So when you have a Zoom lesson, then doesn't come automatic, but it's good to include some silent moments. It also entails the risk of multitasking. So you have to make sure that your student is not just there with the cat, which is her profile image, and sends SMS messages to her friends, but actually she's engaged in the class and in the work you do. And yeah, private sphere. The borders, the limits between private and non-private, between work and private life somehow gets blurred. Students in pajamas in beds, it's just not the thing that you imagine when you teach. So how to overcome all these draining effects of Zoom? I would say, think about these 2 points. Think about establishing, maintaining, and carrying on a meaningful relationship with the students. And you can do this through meaningful content. A few activities that can work on Zoom and which would create this meaningful communication and meaningful content. I call it I and you. It's basically observation activities. So a Zoom class is not a webinar like the webinar we are doing now, but it has to be an interactive thing. engaging the whole person. The whole person includes the body. So introduce activities when students have to observe each other. They can stand up, they can show how they are dressed, they can show their room, they can leave the screen, bring back an object and describe the object. For instance, after vacation in September, I asked them to leave and come back with an object they brought back from vacation, which is important for them. And then we went back to describing those memories that this object would bring back from their summer vacation on the beach. Or they can collect objects in the house which all start with the letter B, or objects which are all blue. So you can be very inventive, but just engage them as a whole person, not just as a face on the screen. Writing activities. Just because you are on the screen, it doesn't mean that you can't use paper. We used a lot of activities doing things on paper, leaving the screen, and they kept asking me, are you still there? Are you still watching me? So they wanted to feel the presence, but they were doing something unscreenish. Collaborative tasks, tasks that also go beyond the virtual classroom of your Zoom session, like the surveys they did with friends and family members about experiencing the lockdown. I mentioned the room, include movement. If your sessions are too long, then you can introduce music, a bit of gymnastics, just make them feel as a whole person in their own bodies. You can do real life activities through Zoom. We did cooking, for instance, and cooking processes are excellent material for presentation and sequencing, teaching presentation skills, teaching sequencing. They also like to film themselves and then sharing these little films on the informal channel like the WhatsApp. Silent activities. Just because you are on Zoom or on a screen, it doesn't mean that you always have to speak. Of course, you always have to speak when you have 40 minutes to finish your story, but in a classroom, you have probably more time. So you can introduce silent creative activities like writing poems, making a drawing. And again, they can do it on paper. They don't have to do it on the screen. And most importantly, give a voice to your students. As I mentioned before, even if it's via a screen, it's not a webinar. So they can do role plays, they can have debates, they can have discussions, and you as a teacher, you can basically step back a little bit and become invisible. I very often also cut my camera, so they don't always see me, but when they see the logo I have, then they know that I'm there, and I can speak with them, because it also breaks a little bit this tension of always seeing a face on the screen, as if Big Brother was watching me. So this was my combo. But what I suggest that you think about your own methods, and then what type of tools you would need, and keeping in mind the clean tool principle, create your own combo for interaction, for content, and for live sessions. And we don't need to use many tools, because really students can get lost in this myriad of technology device tools and platforms. So we have our tools, we have our content, we know how to communicate. We are getting closer to this cloud. We climbed up the mountains, but we work with students who live in those little houses. So how to address them, how to connect with them, and how to use these tools in a humanistic way. Putting the person in focus. Very often we get lost, and especially if we are not very tech savvy, we can get lost in technology, and we forget about the person. We can see the faces on the screen, but we don't really know what the person really feels like, what was his day like? For instance, if you teach adults with business students, I still spend a little bit of time just connecting with them personally, asking them personal questions, making your lessons enjoyable, having always a positive tone, a positive outcome. And with the CCL method, the collaborative creative learning method, I always want to have an outcome, a product at the end. And whenever it comes together, it gives a positive experience for the students, and then they just leave the lesson happy that I've written a letter, I've written a poem, I've done something today which is positive, which is useful. And these little objects and these little things that they create, of course, they will stay with them. This is the lasting experience. So here is the lasting experience that this little teenager group have created from those very messy notes we had on our Google document, which was our course log, with the questions that I've shown you at the beginning, like what are you responsible for, and things like that. And at the end, using the book creator platform, which is free, and you can make it collaborative. So we created a book, a real book together, which is an online thing, but you can, when it's ready, you can also download it in a PDF format, and you can actually make the book on paper. The online version is a little bit more because they can also record their voices. So there are pages in the book where they don't write something, but they say something. So they wrote a story, and instead of writing down the story, they are reading the story. So we call this little book the Lockdown Diary. And in the table of contents, you can see the chapters in the book. And this is just an example of that list that I mentioned, my strategies to cope with the lockdown, and an image of the calendar that this student has created. So here was our lasting experience, and the book at the end. And at the end of the lockdown, to end the year in a proper way, we did meet up with the group, and these are just two girls from the group because their parents authorized me to publish their photo and let them go on Facebook and YouTube. They are lovely students, and they were very happy to leave this course with the result of their content, of their experiences, of everything that they have learned during this very anxious period of time. So teaching online, I'm not going to Mentimeter because it's also time. I see, Hannah, you are saying, but the link is there, and maybe you can do it afterwards. And we can see what you think that teaching online can be, which I would like to emphasize again the fact that this is not online, it's not the same as online teaching. So this is what we looked at. We looked at the context, that online teaching and teaching online are probably not the same things. We looked at tools, that you have to use tools according to your teaching principles, which correspond to your way of teaching, which will help you climb those mountains and reach the cloud. And if you follow your principles, it will all come together in a method. My method is the collaborative creative learning, but thinking back to what Professor Diane Larson Freeman said, and which is very true, that everybody has their own method, and actually it's not one, but a methods, system of methods. So if you would like, you can access the slides I will put after I have finished in the chat box, the links for the slides, and a link to an article, which is very much the same thing, and it was published in the Pilgrims magazine, Humanizing Language Teaching. Thank you very much for listening, being with me. And if you have any questions, I don't know if we still have time, it's 40. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you. That was really amazing, Sheila. I mean, I just love that experience.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing the article to read more and more about that. Allow me to share some of the comments in the chat box here about your presentation here. Thank you, Sheila. That's from Stefania Bellotto. You bring back precious moments when we shared in Pilgrims, Canterbury. I go along with what you presented, and which is great. Creating rapport is, as you said, quite vital. Virtual hugs from Stefania, and again, everyone, she's sharing hugs with all of you.
Thank you very much. Just a word for Steffi, because yes, we are Pilgrims family. So I'm so glad and I'm so thankful that you were here, Steffi. Hi.
I would like to join that sometime. I mean, I've never been to a Pilgrims kind of activity before. Well, Stefania, when we met, I believe in France, Tissot, I think, she introduced the idea. I'd love to join you at a certain point in time. Something here from Harshita Kapoor, probably from India, or I'm not sure. You can confirm, Harshita. Very interesting and diverse activities. Van says, very nice presentation. People are saying thank you. And I wonder if someone would like to ask a question. We can even share, you know, we can unmute our attendees to ask a direct question before we stop for a very short break. So, wow, yeah, Stefania, that's Greece Tissot, yeah. Seems like it. Thank you very much for the reminder. Now I remember. Stefania and I were presenting in one and the same room. She told me, leave some positive vibes in the room after you leave. And I left her a couple of flowers. Hope the vibes worked, Stefania. That was like 2 to 3 years ago. I think it was 2017. We always just exchange positive vibes in restaurants. Sorry. It seems I'm hungry. In conferences. All right. Yeah, 3 years ago. So, Sheila, on that note, I thank you very much for such a wonderful keynote speech. A few notes, housekeeping notes. We're going to close this room, okay, and resume in 20 minutes, exactly on top of the hour. Now it is, let's say, 1:40 p.m. Cairo time. So we should resume part 3 at 2 Cairo time, which is 10 a.m. UTC. That's a workshop, an interactive workshop with a pre-task with Heike Philp. All right, and I would like to share the link for that. I did that a few seconds ago. So give me a second to repost it. If someone can, I'd love that. First of all, this is the pre-registration link, all right, for the third part, which is an interactive workshop. If you wish to look at the instructions for the activity, okay, allow me to go back to our group. All right, and here we are. Now, before, this is our ticket for entry, but anyone is welcome to join even if they are not done with the pre-task. Heike would work with a small group of us, and those who haven't done the task are welcome to join and observe silently, all right? So do we have any questions before we close this part and sign off, pause the live streaming and stop the video? Anybody would like to ask a question are welcome to do that in the chat box. Seems we're fine. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, and 15 minutes from now, we'll be back in part 3 with a different registration link. Thank you very much. See you in a few.